No, quantitative easing did not break the 4% rule. The 4% rule was never intended to be this Newton's fourth law of motion that the industry makes it out to be. It's supposed to be a framework that needs personalizing, accounting for each individual's asset allocation, time horizon, and fees and spending requirement. Yet that hasn't stopped this common criticism that we hear, which is that the 4% rule is no longer effective, no thanks to the current low real bond yields or negative real bond yields that we see today. Well, there are three reasons why this argument doesn't hold up for me. The first one is that actually, to start with, the 4% rule was never meant to be applied blindly. Bill Bengen used a very, very specific portfolio, which is a 50-50 US portfolio, 30-year horizon, and the 4% rule is the worst case scenario, in US history. Once you apply fees to that framework, actually for that same portfolio and time horizon, well, you end up with a 77% success rate as opposed to 100% success rate that Bengen started with. If you apply the framework to a UK retiree, for instance, invest in a 50-50 portfolio, 1% fee, well, the 4% rule ends up with a 70% success rate. And so, we've written about how this framework applies across the world. It was never meant to be, this catch-all, number that the industry thinks it is. It's supposed to be a framework to think about risk, to think about what worst-case scenario might look like for somebody in retirement, and to go from there. The second point is that this comment that we often hear, that the negative bond yields that we have today is unprecedented. It's patently false, because if you look at US and UK history over the last 100 years, we do have periods of negative real yield on bonds. We had that in 1910s, in 1940s, 1950s, and again in 1970s. So again, the latest bout of negative real yields that we have on bonds is nothing new. There are several examples of that in history. And the final point is we often hear this idea that there is a bond bubble, and at some point this bond bubble is going to burst. Well, actually, contrary to common belief, negative returns on bonds in real terms are actually not uncommon. According to Professor Errol Dimson's data, if you look at UK government bonds, for instance, between 1914 and 1920, UK government bond lost 60% in real terms. I'll give you another example. 1972 to 74, UK bondholders would have lost 50% of their wealth in a space of 3-year period. And so I don't know what future bond returns going to look like, but I'm going to wager that it can't be any worse than what we have within historical data over the last 100 years. And so for these reasons, the 4% rule, more specifically the sustainable draw rate framework, was designed to capture this type of scenarios. And so, no, quantitative easing did not break the 4% rule.